At 12:03 a.m., my phone began vibrating hard enough to crawl across the kitchen counter. It stopped beside the little white bakery box I had carried home from my parents' 45th anniversary party. Through the clear plastic lid, I could see the cupcake my daughter had been too ashamed to touch. The frosting had tilted during the drive. A tiny sugar bee leaned sideways as if it wanted to escape. Earlier that evening, Paige had studied it and whispered, "This thing needs a building permit." I had laughed then. 6 hours later, she was asleep upstairs with her bedroom light on, still wearing the oversized gray sweatshirt she used whenever she wanted to disappear. My phone flashed again. Mom, Chelsea. Dad, Chelsea. Aunt Carol, Chelsea. The family group chat had gone from 3 unread messages to 84 in less than 4 minutes. Chelsea wrote, "Delete that screenshot." Mom followed with, "Jessica, you have no idea what you are interfering with. Dad ordered me to call before I made anything permanent." Chelsea warned that Paige would be the one who suffered if I kept pushing. Then Aunt Carol asked, "Who is the cupcake kid? Is that a cooking show?" Her next message read, "I opened the shared folder and now there is a picture of Charles in a bathrobe." Dad replied in capital letters that the picture was not relevant. For the first time since leaving the party, I almost laughed. I declined Chelsea's next call and looked at the only 2 images I had posted. The first was a screenshot Brooke Lawson had sent me 3 weeks earlier. At the time, I had not understood it. It showed one unfinished campaign slide, Raising Without Excess. Episode 7B, The Cupcake Kid, Dessert Hesitation, Maternal Response to be Captured Live. Beneath those words was an unblurred photograph of my 11-year-old daughter standing in my kitchen. The second image was one I had taken 10 minutes earlier. I had lifted the untouched cupcake from its box and found a small gold logo printed beneath the paper liner. "Are we launch event?" Under the 2 photographs, I had written one sentence. "Before this campaign goes live, state in writing who authorized the commercial use of my daughter's image." I did not have the full presentation. I did not know how long they had been filming Paige or where the money had gone. But my family's panic told me Brooke's warning had been real. At 12:11, my lawyer texted that the preservation notices had been delivered and the agency had been asked to pause the scheduled release. She told me not to answer my family. I turned the phone face down. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Paige appeared in the doorway wrapped in her blanket. "Are they mad at us?" she asked. "They're scared." "Of what?" I looked again at the words dessert hesitation and maternal response. "Of me finding out what they planned tonight." She sat beside me and placed half the blanket around my shoulders. "You look worse than I do." This time I laughed. It came out broken, but it was real. Paige stared at the cupcake. "I don't want it anymore." "You don't have to." She nodded toward the screenshot. "Did Aunt Chelsea put me in one of her videos?" I had spent the drive home planning how to protect her from the answer. But everyone else had already made too many decisions about what Paige was allowed to know, feel, eat, and become. "I think she has been using pictures of you," I said. "And I think what happened at the cupcake table was planned." By sunrise, there would be 109 missed calls. But the most important sound in that kitchen was Paige taking one slow breath. Then, why didn't anyone ask me? Stay with us to discover what my family had planned for Paige that night, and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the moment their perfect image begins to collapse. 6 hours earlier, Paige and I were driving north along the lake beneath a sky the color of polished steel. My parents, Diane and Charles Monroe, were celebrating 45 years of marriage at a private lakeside lodge. Chelsea and I had been strained for years, but Paige loved her grandparents, and I had not wanted adult resentment to become her inheritance. She sat beside me in a simple blue dress with a gray cardigan pulled over it, tugging the sleeves down until they nearly covered her fingers. "You know you can take that off inside," I said. "I know." She kept pulling anyway. The lodge looked like a magazine advertisement. White flowers framed the entrance, Lights glowed beneath glass lanterns, and a string quartet played near windows overlooking the lake. Small gold logos appeared on the welcome board and dessert napkins, subtle enough to look decorative. A young man with a camera moved through the room. Chelsea introduced him as part of the team recording family memories. The dessert table stopped Paige in her tracks. Cupcakes stood in rows beneath glass domes, each one topped with frosting so high, it seemed structurally unsound. Paige pointed at one with a sugar bee. "That thing needs a building permit. It may not have passed inspection," I whispered. Her smile came quickly, then vanished when Chelsea approached. My sister looked immaculate in cream silk. She hugged Paige while turning her face toward the nearest camera. "There's my beautiful niece," she said brightly. Mom joined us and brushed a hand over Paige's shoulder. "What did you eat today, sweetheart?" The question sounded caring. Paige's body answered before her mouth did, her shoulders folded inward. "Breakfast," she said. "And lunch?" "A sandwich." Mom nodded as though recording the answer. Dad appeared beside me, pleased with himself. He pointed toward the lake, the flowers, and the live music. "This place cost a fortune," he said. "People have no idea what an event like this takes." Across the room, the camera operator adjusted his tripod. The lens was not aimed at my parents' anniversary table, it was fixed on the cupcakes. I told myself I was being suspicious. Then Paige stepped toward the dessert table. Mom looked at the cameraman. Chelsea touched the small microphone clipped near her collar. Paige reached for the cupcake with the sugar bee. Chelsea smiled. "Don't eat too much," she said slowly. "You didn't pay for any of this." A few guests laughed immediately. Others joined because everyone else had. The sound rolled across the room before anyone stopped to consider who the joke had landed on. Paige froze. Her fingers hovered above the paper wrapper. Then she slowly pulled her hand back and tucked it against her chest. Heat surged through me. I wanted to ask Chelsea what kind of woman humiliates an 11-year-old over a cupcake. I wanted to knock the microphone from her dress and force every laughing guest to look at my daughter. Then, I saw the red recording light. Chelsea was watching me, not Paige. Dad had raised his phone. Mom stood perfectly still, waiting. They wanted my anger. Whatever this was, my reaction was part of it. I lifted Paige's cardigan from the back of a chair and settled it over her shoulders. A server, confused by our movement, handed me a white bakery box containing the untouched cupcake. "We're going home," I said. Mom stepped into my path. "Do not ruin our anniversary over one harmless joke." I met her eyes. "I'm not the one who just did that." No one laughed this time. Paige and I crossed the room while the quartet continued playing. Behind us, the party remained beautiful, expensive, and suddenly silent. In the car, Paige kept both hands under her sleeves. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "No." My voice was too tight, so I tried again. "No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong." I wanted to tell her everything else, but I did not yet understand what I had seen. I only knew that my family had been waiting for a performance I had refused to give them. At a red light, my phone illuminated in the cup holder. A message from Brooke Lawson had been sitting unread for 2 hours. "If tonight is the launch event, do not let them film Paige near the dessert table." I looked at the bakery box on the floor between Paige's shoes. Then I looked back toward the dark line of the lake. The humiliation had not happened by accident. It had been scheduled. By the time we reached home, Paige had stopped asking questions. She went upstairs without turning on the hallway light. I followed her into her room, helped unzip the blue dress, and laid the gray sweatshirt across the bed. She pulled it on before I could suggest pajamas. I did not ask her to sit down and explain how she felt. Too many adults had already spent the evening watching for the right reaction from her. I handed her a glass of water and sat beside her, while she removed the clips from her hair. She placed each one carefully on the nightstand. After a long silence, she said, "I don't usually eat at Grandma's anymore." "What do you mean?" "She takes pictures. Sometimes before I eat, sometimes after. If I ask why, she says she wants to remember family time. How long has that been happening? Since winter, maybe. I wanted to ask why she had never told me, but the answer was obvious. She had expected me to worry, confront my mother, or stop taking her there. Paige had been trying to protect the adults from the consequences of their own behavior. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "You don't have to explain anything else tonight." She looked relieved, which hurt more than if she had cried. When her breathing slowed, I left the door open and went downstairs. The bakery box sat on the kitchen counter. I photographed the logo beneath the cupcake liner, then opened the message Brooke Lawson had sent before the party. 3 weeks earlier, Brooke's name had appeared in my inbox with no introduction. She had once worked for Chelsea, although I had only met her twice. Her message contained a blurred screenshot from what looked like a content calendar and a photograph of Paige standing in my kitchen with her face fully visible. The screenshot showed only fragments. Episode 7B. The Cupcake Kid. Dessert hesitation. Maternal response to be captured live. Brooke wrote that she no longer worked for Chelsea and could not explain more without legal advice. She warned me that family material might have been used commercially. I had not known whether the screenshot was genuine, edited, or taken out of context. I refused to accuse my sister of exploiting Paige based on one message from a former employee. My teachers' union had recently circulated information about a nonprofit project protecting children's digital privacy. I contacted them and was referred to Marion Holt, an attorney who handled the emergency stage of qualifying cases pro bono. Marion never claimed Brooke's screenshot proved anything. She told me to preserve the original email, record when I received it, and avoid forwarding the file through multiple accounts. I was not to confront Chelsea, guess passwords, or ask anyone inside the company to take records they had no legal right to access. Most importantly, she told me not to place Paige in a situation simply to see whether my family would film her. "If there is misconduct," Marion had said, "we document what already exists. We do not create another harmful event to prove the first one." That was why I had still gone to the anniversary party. I believed the problem might involve a few old photographs used without permission. I did not know the dessert table itself might be a set. Now, I typed one question to Brooke. "Is this the scene you warned me about?" Her reply came less than a minute later. "Yes, episode 2B. I called her through the number in her email. Brooke answered quietly and said she no longer had access to Chelsea's sponsor presentations, cloud storage, or raw footage. She would not enter company accounts after being terminated. "What can you show me legally?" I asked. She sent one photograph she had taken of a scheduling monitor during her final week. Most of the screen was cropped out, but the visible line showed episode 7B scheduled for release at midnight. I forwarded the original messages and the new image to Marion. "We use what we have," she replied. "Nothing more." The letters had already been drafted in case Brooke's warning proved credible. Marion sent preservation notices to Chelsea's agency, the production company, and the listed platform contact. She demanded that no footage, messages, drafts, upload logs, or payment records connected to Paige be deleted or altered. She also requested that the midnight release be paused while consent was investigated. At 11:58, I opened the family group chat. I posted Brooke's original screenshot. Then I posted the photograph of the gold RWE launch event logo beneath the cupcake liner. Underneath, I wrote, "Before this campaign goes live, state in writing, who authorized the commercial use of my daughter's image?" For several seconds, no one replied. Then Chelsea called. I declined it. She called again, followed by Mom, then Dad. Messages appeared so quickly that I could barely read them. Chelsea demanded that I delete the screenshot because it contained confidential business information. Mom accused me of turning a misunderstanding into a scandal. Dad asked where I had obtained the screenshot and who had photographed the cupcake liner. None of them asked whether Paige was all right. Chelsea's tone changed within minutes. First, she threatened legal action against Brooke and anyone distributing company property. Then she insisted the campaign was educational. Finally, she asked me to call privately so we could protect Paige from unnecessary attention. I did not answer. Aunt Carol entered the conversation after opening a folder attached to one of Dad's frantic messages. "Who is the cupcake kid?" she wrote. "Is this a cooking show?" A moment later she added, "Why is there a picture of Charles in a bathrobe?" Dad replied that the photograph was not relevant and ordered everyone to stop opening files. I almost laughed. My father could still be embarrassed by a bathrobe while showing no concern that his granddaughter had left his party ashamed to touch food. Mom wrote that I was destroying the memory of her anniversary. The memory she wanted to preserve included my sister humiliating Paige while a camera waited for my reaction. Yet in my mother's version, the true offense was my refusal to keep it private. Chelsea left a voicemail. Her voice began sharp. She said I had no idea how sponsorship agreements worked and could expose the family to liability. Halfway through, she softened. She said she loved Paige, that everything had been intended to help, and that she would explain if I stopped Marion from contacting the agency. By the end, she was begging. I saved the voicemail without responding. At 12:11, Marion confirmed that the notices had been delivered and the agency had acknowledged the request to pause the release. "Do not argue with them," she wrote. "Let their messages remain their messages." I turned the phone face down. A floorboard creaked above me. Paige came into the kitchen wrapped in her blanket and sat beside me. She lifted one side over my shoulders. "You look worse than I do," she said. A tired laugh escaped me. She looked at the screenshot on my laptop. "What is the cupcake kid?" "I don't know everything yet." "Is it me?" "I think Chelsea used at least one picture of you in a campaign. I also think tonight's party may have been used to film a scene for it." Paige tightened the blanket around herself. "How long has she been filming me?" "I don't know. Marion is making sure nothing gets deleted so we can find out." Her eyes moved to the bakery box. "Did Grandma know?" I would not answer by guessing. I know she looked at the cameraman before Chelsea spoke. I don't know what else she knew. The phone vibrated again. Chelsea had sent an image directly to me. It was a photograph of a PDF titled "Minor Appearance and Commercial Use Release." Paige's name appeared in the first paragraph. Chelsea's company appeared in the second. At the bottom of the page was my signature in blue ink. Not something similar to my signature. Mine. Chelsea's message appeared beneath it. "You signed. If you destroy me, I will prove you knew everything." I enlarged the image until the letters blurred. I had never seen that document before. But the signature was real. I sent Chelsea's photograph of the consent form to Marion before I touched anything else. My first instinct was to call my sister and demand an explanation. My second was to enlarge the signature until I could find some obvious mistake that proved it was fake. Marion stopped me from trusting either instinct. "A signature that looks real proves only that someone had access to a real signature," she said when we spoke the next morning. "We need the original file, its creation history, the delivery method, and the person who claims to have received it." I told her I knew the signature was mine. "You recognize an image?" she replied. "That is not the same as remembering the act of signing." She asked me to search my records for documents I had signed for my parents, Chelsea, or Paige. I found school forms, medical authorizations, birthday waivers, and a temporary emergency authorization I had given Mom the previous summer when Paige stayed with her for 4 days. Marion told me to save everything without altering the file names. Then she added, "Influencers usually back up their lives 3 times because they assume every sentence they say belongs in a national archive. Vanity can be very useful in discovery." It was the closest thing to optimism I had heard since the party. Brooke had been waiting for instructions from her own attorney. Later that morning, Marion arranged a secure transfer and explained exactly what Brooke could provide, without entering Chelsea's accounts or taking anything she had not lawfully possessed. Brooke uploaded an 84-page sponsor presentation she had downloaded while she was still the campaign's content coordinator. Her job had required her to prepare materials for brand meetings, which meant the file had been in her authorized work folder before Chelsea fired her. Marian preserved the original in her legal file. She warned me not to forward it, post screenshots, or discuss its contents publicly. The deck was not a weapon for social media. It was a basis for formal preservation requests, document production, and verification with Chelsea's agency. I opened the copy Marian allowed me to review through a protected portal. The title page carried Chelsea's smiling face beside the gold logo I had found under the cupcake, Raising Without Excess. The next slide introduced the campaign's featured story, The Cupcake Kid. Beneath the words was a photograph of Paige, standing in my kitchen. She wore the yellow t-shirt she had loved the previous summer. Her face was uncovered, and behind her I could see the crooked cabinet handle I had been meaning to replace. The caption described her as an 11-year-old raised without nutritional boundaries or maternal accountability. I read the sentence twice before understanding what Chelsea had done. She had not merely used Paige's photograph. She had written a role for her. The next pages contained pictures from different months. Paige eating cake at a cousin's birthday. Paige sitting at mom's table with a plate in front of her. Paige turning away from the camera while holding a sweatshirt against her stomach. One photograph made my fingers go numb. Paige was crying in mom's guest room because a pair of jeans no longer fit. I had not been present that afternoon. Mom had told me Paige spilled juice on herself and needed different clothes. The image had been cropped to remove the bed and family photographs. In Chelsea's presentation, it looked like documentary evidence of a child confronting the consequences of unchecked indulgence. Beside it was a quotation attributed to Paige. "Sometimes I hide food because I don't want mom to be disappointed." I had never heard her say that. The slide claimed the campaign would follow a child whose mother confused love with constant permission. Chelsea positioned herself as the relative willing to intervene when a parent refused to establish limits. The product being sold was not only a wellness program, it was a story with 3 assigned characters. Paige was the damaged child. Chelsea was the courageous truth-teller. I was the mother who had failed. A revenue forecast estimated how each episode might convert viewers into paid subscribers. The projections increased whenever the planned content involved crying, family conflict, or public confrontation. Episode 7B had the highest predicted conversion rate. Dessert hesitation. Maternal escalation. Visible family rupture. They had reduced my daughter pulling her hand away from a cupcake to a sales forecast. A payment appendix showed that a sponsor had transferred $62,000 to Chelsea's company 3 weeks before the anniversary party. Marian had already asked the agency to confirm the record. Their attorney acknowledged the payment existed, although they refused to discuss its purpose without formal process. 2 days after the deposit, money left the same business account. A payment went to the Lakeside Lodge. Another covered catering. There were separate charges for flowers, lighting, video production, and the dessert display. The internal budget label read RWE, Launch Event. I stared at the total until the numbers stopped looking like numbers. The party had not simply provided Chelsea with a convenient place to film. The campaign had paid for the room, the food, the cameras, and the cupcake. Paige had been told she had not contributed toward. One screenshot in the deck showed a message Chelsea had sent to Mom. Paige's transformation arc just paid for the entire anniversary weekend. I pushed my chair back from the desk. At the lodge, Chelsea had looked at an 11-year-old girl and said, "You didn't pay for any of this." The truth was worse than the insult. Paige had paid for it without knowing. Her photographs had paid for the flowers. Her private fears had paid for the music. Her humiliation had paid for the camera that waited for her mother to lose control. My parents had celebrated 45 years of marriage with money earned from turning their granddaughter into a cautionary tale. I closed the presentation and walked to the sink. My stomach rolled, but anger kept me upright. When I returned, Marian had marked several pages for review. Many of the photographs had source information, embedded in the exported files. Some came from Chelsea's phone. Others did not. Chelsea had not attended the cousin's birthday where one picture was taken. She had not been in Mom's guest room when Paige cried over the jeans. She had not been present for several family dinners, shown in the deck. The source file names and device data connected at least 4 images to Mom's phone. That did not yet prove why she sent them, or what Chelsea had told her. Marian reminded me not to build conclusions faster than the evidence, but it proved Mom had supplied material. The woman Paige trusted enough to tell about school, clothes, and food had passed at least part of that private world to Chelsea. Before taking further action, Marian reviewed my divorce judgment. It gave me primary authority over major legal decisions involving Paige, including contracts and the commercial use of her identity. Ryan Bennett, my former husband, lived in Colorado and had scheduled parenting time, but he did not share authority over those decisions. Marian still contacted him because Chelsea might claim he had consented separately. Ryan called me that afternoon. Our marriage had ended badly enough that we rarely spoke beyond travel dates and school updates, but his answer was immediate. "I never agreed to any campaign," he said. "I didn't even know Paige was in one." He searched his email and found a message Chelsea had sent months earlier after he questioned why Paige appeared in the background of one of her posts. "Please don't interfere with the family's wellness project. Jessica is handling the permissions." Ryan had never replied. He forwarded the email to Marian and signed a short affidavit confirming that he had given no consent, received no payment, and had never discussed a commercial release with me. One possible excuse disappeared. Late that evening, I reopened the sponsor deck and continued through the final planning section. The last pages outlined the anniversary event. They described camera placement, the dessert table, and the need to capture an authentic reaction. Then I reached a slide I had not seen before. At the top, in Chelsea's polished brand font, were the words, "Final escalation. Trigger maternal defensiveness on camera." The campaign had never been only about Paige. They had been preparing to turn the camera toward me. The sponsor deck told me that Mom had supplied photographs. It did not tell me how much of Paige's private life she had handed over. I began with the pages Marian had flagged. Some quotations were general enough to have been invented by Chelsea's marketing team. Others were too specific. One slide claimed Paige hid snacks in the bottom drawer of her desk because she was afraid I would be disappointed in her. Another described a classmate whispering about her body during gym. A third said she avoided changing clothes in front of other girls. Those were not observations a camera could capture from across a room. They were confessions. I waited until Paige came home from school before asking anything. Marian had advised me not to question her like a witness. I was her mother first, and she had already been studied enough by adults who wanted useful answers. We sat at the kitchen table with colored pencils scattered between us. Paige was drawing a row of houses with blank windows. "Did Grandma ever ask you whether kids at school teased you?" I asked. "She kept shading one roof. Sometimes." "What else did she ask?" Paige shrugged, but her pencil stopped moving. "She asked if I ever hid food. She said lots of kids do it when they feel embarrassed." "Did she ask whether you thought I would be disappointed in you?" Her eyes lifted to mine. "How did you know that?" I forced my hands to stay open on the table. "Some things you told Grandma were written in Chelsea's campaign." Paige stared at the drawing. "But those were private." "I know they were." "She said I could tell her anything." I wanted to tell her that my mother had betrayed her. I wanted to say it with enough anger to make the truth unmistakable. Then I saw the fear on Paige's face. If I let my rage fill the room, she might mistake it for anger at her. She might believe she had caused this by trusting the wrong person. "You did nothing wrong," I said. "Talking to someone you love is not permission for them to sell what you said." I told her because I didn't want you to worry. "I wish you had told me, but I understand why you didn't. The person who broke your trust is responsible for breaking it." She pressed the pencil hard enough to snap the tip. "Did everyone read it?" I don't know how many people saw the full presentation. Marian is finding out. Paige pushed the broken pencil aside. I don't want to talk about it anymore. We can stop whenever you need to. I did not ask one more question. That night, I sat on the couch reviewing copies Marian had cleared for me. My shoulders ached from holding them tight. Paige came downstairs carrying the blanket from her bed. She placed it over me and tucked one edge behind my arm. You look like the one who needs this, she said. I'm supposed to be taking care of you. You can still do that under a blanket. I smiled despite myself. She sat beside me for a few minutes without asking what was on the screen. The quiet did more for me than any advice could have. The next morning, Marian called. Brooke's attorney had confirmed that Brooke had lawfully retained a limited administrative export created during her employment. The export contained no customer payment data, but it included campaign roles, draft captions, and login records she had used while scheduling posts. Chelsea's agency had also responded to the preservation notice with preliminary account information. The two sources matched. Several accounts that appeared to belong to concerned mothers, teachers, and health advocates had repeatedly logged in from the same home internet connection. My parents' house. The device records pointed to Mom's laptop and tablet. Marian showed me the comments attached to the early campaign drafts. The mother is the real problem. Someone needs to save this child before she loses all control. This is what happens when a parent chooses comfort over responsibility. I had read comments like those before, under Chelsea's public wellness posts. I had imagined strangers sitting in distant kitchens, judging a child they had never met. The strangers had been my mother. The records showed that Mom used more than one account. One would criticize me, another would defend Chelsea, a third would ask provocative questions that kept the argument moving. She was not expressing one cruel opinion. She was manufacturing a crowd. A message from Mom to Chelsea appeared beside a chart tracking engagement. People engage more when they feel angry at the mother. I read it until the words stopped looking like English. Mom had once taught frightened teenagers how to ask for help. She had spent years telling parents that children needed safe adults. Paige had believed she was one. Now I knew Mom had taken the things Paige whispered to her and converted them into captions designed to make strangers angry at me. Marian told me not to call. I called anyway. Mom answered on the first ring. Jessica, thank God. We need to stop this before lawyers destroy the family. You used Paige's private conversations. There was a pause, but not the kind that came before remorse. It sounded like calculation. I shared concerns with her aunt. You created fake accounts and attacked both of us. I wrote what people were already thinking. The sentence was so calm that it frightened me more than shouting would have. You told strangers she had no control. You told them I was failing her. You are too close to see what is happening. Paige needs help, and you have spent years pretending love means never making her uncomfortable. She trusted you. She still can. Once you stop turning this into a war. You put her words into a marketing campaign. Mom exhaled sharply. Chelsea needed authentic content. We could not help Paige if everyone kept hiding the truth. The word content ended the conversation for me. My daughter is not content. Jessica, do not hang up on me. I ended the call. My hands shook after the screen went dark. I had expected denial, excuses, perhaps even tears. I had not expected Mom to speak as if using Paige had been an act of courage. A message arrived several minutes later. I thought it would be an apology. Instead, Mom wrote, Your father handled the legal side. Chelsea and I were told you had consented. I read the message twice. Dad had spent the party behaving as though cameras, contracts, and campaigns were beneath him. Mom had just placed him at the center of all three. Marian would not let me treat Mom's message as proof that Dad had created the consent form. It tells us what Diane wants you to believe, she said. It may be true, partly true, or an attempt to move attention away from herself. We verify before we accuse. For the next 2 days, verification moved faster than I expected. The first sponsor notified Chelsea's agency that it was suspending the campaign pending review of the consent records. A second sponsor followed that afternoon. By evening, the agency confirmed that episode 7B had been locked and could not be released, edited, or deleted without legal approval. Paige was sitting at the kitchen table when Marian called with the news. I told her only that the video from the anniversary party would not be posted. Ever? She asked. Not while this is being investigated. Her shoulders lowered. She opened the refrigerator, considered the leftover pasta, and said, "Can we celebrate with garlic bread? Or is that too much excitement for one day? We can risk it." For one dinner, neither of us discussed Chelsea, sponsors, cameras, or signatures. Paige complained about a science worksheet. I burned one edge of the bread and ate it before she could point it out. The normality felt borrowed, but I accepted it. Chelsea disappeared from social media that evening. Her public page went blank. The subscription community showed a maintenance notice. Several relatives interpreted the silence as guilt. Aunt Carol announced in the family chat that the internet may finally be learning manners. I knew better than to trust quiet from someone who had built a career by controlling when other people looked at her. The next morning, Chelsea returned. Her video was 12 minutes long. She sat in a pale room with no visible branding, wearing a plain blue sweater and almost no makeup. A glass of water rested beside her. Her voice trembled only at the places where trembling made her sound sincere. She never said Paige's name. She referred to a child I love deeply and a family member who has chosen to misunderstand a wellness project. She said the campaign had been designed to help parents recognize harmful patterns before children carried them into adulthood. I may have spoken imperfectly, she said, pausing to wipe one tear, but I will never apologize for caring. She claimed every image had been provided with permission. She said the anniversary footage had been recorded in a controlled environment for an educational case study. She called it authentic storytelling. Then she displayed part of the consent form. My name appeared above the signature line. My blue ink signature looked completely real because it was real. The public did not know where Chelsea had obtained it or how it had been placed on that page. They saw only a document and a woman crying beside it. Chelsea included a 6-second excerpt from the lodge. It began after her comment at the dessert table. Paige stood with her hands against her chest while I put the cardigan around her. The clip ended as I guided her toward the door. Chelsea told viewers that a longer recording had been selectively described and stripped of context. She said my decision to remove Paige from the party had been portrayed as protection when it had actually been the escalation the family had hoped to avoid. She never explained what the cameras had been waiting to capture. Near the end, her tone changed. She said some people use children's privacy as leverage in financial disputes. She did not accuse me directly, but she mentioned private demands and pressure involving future earnings. No private demand had come from me. Dad had tried to call. Chelsea had begged me to stop Marian. I had asked only that the campaign be suspended and the records preserved. The implication was enough. Within an hour, comments divided into two camps. Some viewers demanded that Chelsea release the complete document. Others said no mother would sign a commercial release and then complain after money appeared. One comment was repeated so often, it began to look like a slogan. This is not about a child. It is about a sister who wants a cut. Other accounts began comparing photographs from Chelsea's older posts, searching for anything that might identify Paige. People enlarged backgrounds, matched clothing, and speculated about our town. Chelsea had claimed she was protecting a child while giving thousands of strangers a puzzle that led directly to her. My school email filled before lunch. A stranger told me I should be ashamed of using Paige to settle a family grudge. Another said public employees should not participate in extortion. Someone found the library's main number and left a message, asking whether the school supported fraudulent mothers. The principal called me into her office. She was careful and kind, but she had already received 3 emails. containing screenshots of Chelsea's video. "We are not taking a position," she said. "I need to know whether Paige's safety at school may be affected. Until then," I had imagined the danger living inside phones and laptops. Hearing the question in my workplace made it physical. Marian watched Chelsea's video once and closed the browser. "Authentic storytelling in a controlled environment," she said. "That is an impressive number of words for staging." I wanted to release the sponsor deck. I wanted to show the payment schedule, Mom's messages, and the words trigger maternal defensiveness. I wanted to answer every stranger who thought a polished video was more trustworthy than a frightened child. Marian refused. "Chelsea wants you emotional and public," she said. "Do not give her a second anniversary party. We answer through evidence, not comments." That afternoon, Dad sent me a private message asking to speak without lawyers. I replied that any proposal had to be in writing. He wrote back that this did not need to become a permanent family rupture. If I stopped the claims, signed a confidentiality agreement, and confirmed that Chelsea had acted with my permission, he would make sure Paige's college education was fully funded. The offer was not an apology. It was a purchase price for my silence. I forwarded the message to Marian and told Dad I would not discuss it by phone. Minutes later, Chelsea posted a second statement. This one included selected details about my finances. She said I had struggled after my divorce, carried credit card debt, and previously asked family members for help with home repairs. The facts were distorted, but not invented. 2 years earlier, Dad had lent me money when my furnace failed. I had repaid him over 10 months. Chelsea presented it as proof that I had long resented her success and now saw her campaign as an opportunity. By dinner, the story had changed. I was no longer the mother whose daughter had been filmed without informed consent. I was the financially desperate sister attacking a successful woman after approving the project. I kept my phone turned face down while Paige ate. Every few minutes, the screen lit against the table. She noticed. "What are people saying?" "Nothing you need to read." Her expression tightened. After dinner, she went upstairs to finish homework. I began deleting messages from strangers without opening them. Halfway through, I saw an email from another parent at Paige's school. Her daughter had heard 2 boys whisper, "Cupcake kid," near the lockers. I closed the message when Paige came back into the room. She had left her science notebook on the table. As she reached for it, my phone lit again. A preview showed the words, "Cupcake kid," before I could turn it over. Paige stopped. "Is that what Chelsea called me?" I did not answer quickly enough. "Do people at school know?" "Someone may have recognized a picture." Her face lost color. "How many pictures?" "We're still finding that out." "How many people have seen them?" I had spent days trying to keep that question away from her until I could offer a number, a solution, or some kind of safety. Now she stood in front of me, waiting for the truth I did not have. "How many people have seen me?" she asked. "I don't know," I told her. Paige stood across the kitchen table, waiting for me to turn the answer into something safer. "I don't know exactly how many people saw the pictures," I continued. "The campaign was shown to sponsors and people working with Chelsea. Some images may also have appeared in private groups. Marian is trying to find out." Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. "You knew people had pictures of me." I learned how serious it was after the party. "You knew enough to call a lawyer before we went." The accusation landed because it was true. "I had 1 screenshot and 1 photograph," I said. "I didn't know whether they were real. I thought Chelsea might have used a few old family pictures without asking. I never knew they were planning to film you at the dessert table. But you didn't tell me any of that. I wanted to protect you until I understood what was happening." Paige folded her arms across her sweatshirt. "Everyone keeps deciding what I can handle. That's how they did it too." The room seemed to narrow around us. Chelsea had decided Paige could handle being filmed because the footage might help other families. Mom had decided she could share Paige's secrets because she believed she knew what was best. Dad had decided her image could finance a campaign because adults controlled the contracts. I had told myself I was different because my decisions came from love. But Paige had not said my intentions were the same. She had said the method was. I had still made her choices for her. "I'm sorry," I said. She looked almost more upset by the apology. "Are you going to use me to sue them?" "No. You already have lawyers. The case is about what they did to you, but you are not evidence I get to carry into a room whenever I need it. You will not have to make a video. You will not have to read comments. You will not have to stand in court and explain yourself to strangers. What if they ask me questions? We can refuse things that are unnecessary. Marion can ask the court to protect your privacy. If there is ever something you might need to participate in, I will explain it first." Paige looked down at her hands. "What if I want to know some of it?" I almost answered by telling her what information would be appropriate. I stopped before the words came out. "What do you want to know?" The question surprised both of us. She pulled out a chair and sat down. "I want to know who gave Chelsea the pictures." "All right. I don't want to read what people wrote." "You will not have to." "I want to know where the money went." I nodded. "And I don't want to see Grandma." The last request came quietly. My instinct was to say she did not have to see Mom until she felt ready. Even that answer assumed there might come a moment when she should be ready. "You do not have to see her," I said. "If you ever change your mind, it will be because you choose to, not because anyone pressures you." I opened a notebook and wrote down her 4 decisions. Paige watched me, suspicious at first. "What are you doing?" "Making sure I remember what you asked for." I sent a photograph of the page to Marion with a note, explaining that these were Paige's boundaries. Marion replied that she would treat them as instructions, not suggestions. Later, I showed Paige only the title page of the sponsor deck. I covered the photograph before turning the laptop toward her. She read the name, Raising Without Excess, and frowned. "That's a lot of words for something with no kindness in it." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. She glanced at me. "Was that mean?" "No, it was accurate." I closed the laptop. "I'm not sorry because I failed to protect you perfectly," I said. "No parent can promise that. I'm sorry because I forgot to ask how you wanted to be protected." Paige picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I don't always know." "You are allowed not to know. We can decide one thing at a time." We agreed on a signal. If either of us said yellow light, the conversation stopped immediately. Paige would not have to explain why, and I would not ask one more question until she brought the subject up again. That evening, I went into her room to return a stack of clean clothes. A sketchbook lay open on the floor beside her bed. I knew better than to read private writing, but the page was a drawing, visible before I could look away. 6 people stood inside rectangular frames. Each body was complete, but every face had been cut off by the edge of the picture. I turned another page with Paige's permission after she came in behind me. There were more. A girl standing beside a dinner table while a camera frame removed the top half of her head. A woman holding a phone where her face should have been. A child in a blue dress, drawn outside the frame, while several faceless adults smiled inside it. "How long have you been drawing these?" I asked. "Since Grandma started taking pictures." "Why didn't you show me?" Paige looked at the floor. I thought maybe I was being dramatic. The campaign had affected her long before Chelsea spoke at the dessert table. Paige had noticed the cameras, the questions, and the way adults observed her. She had lacked the language to explain it, so she had drawn what it felt like to be visible and erased at the same time. I did not tell her what the pictures meant. I asked whether she wanted me to see the rest. "Not yet," she said. I closed the sketchbook and placed it where she wanted. The next morning, Marion called about the consent form. The agency had finally confirmed that the PDF did not contain the audit trail expected from DocuSign, Adobe Sign, or another electronic signature platform. It had been uploaded directly into a sponsor portal. Chelsea had checked a box warranting that her company possessed valid parental permission. Preliminary metadata suggested the PDF had been created after the date printed on the document. "That helps us." Marian said, "but it does not yet prove who created it or how your signature was added." She needed the original uploaded PDF, portal logs, any source file preserved in Chelsea's studio cloud, and the earlier document from which my signature might have been copied. Until a court-authorized limited discovery, we had only signs of fabrication, not the complete chain. I looked through my old paperwork again. The blue signature appeared on several forms, but Marian told me not to guess which one had been used. "We prove it," she said. "We do not build a better story than the evidence." That afternoon, Brooke sent a message through Marian's secure portal. She had found an old audio clip among the files she had been authorized to review while still employed by Chelsea. She believed it had been recorded months before the anniversary party. Marian listened first, then allowed me to hear it. There was background noise from my parents' dining room. Dishes touched. A chair scraped against the floor. Then Paige's younger voice came through. "Does my mom know you're filming me?" A woman answered from nearby. "She doesn't need to know yet." I listened twice. The voice was familiar. It was not Chelsea's. The woman in Brooke's recording was my mother. I knew it before Marian finished the first playback, but knowing a voice and proving its identity were different things. Brooke identified the room where the clip had been recorded, and an agency calendar placed Mom at the scheduled shoot that afternoon. A second preserved audio file captured her using the same phrase, "She doesn't need to know yet," while discussing whether I should be told about a family dinner Chelsea wanted to film. 4 weeks had passed since the anniversary party. Marian had filed the civil complaint, and the court had allowed limited, expedited discovery, because the campaign involved a child's image, and there was a risk that digital records might disappear. The order did not give us access to everything. It required specific records connected to the consent form, the sponsor upload, and the anniversary campaign. The sponsor portal produced the PDF Chelsea had submitted. The studio cloud produced an earlier source file. Mom's attorney turned over a copy of the medical authorization she had kept from the previous summer, when Paige stayed with my parents while I attended a work conference. I remembered signing it at Mom's kitchen counter. It was a single-page emergency form, allowing her to take Paige to a doctor or hospital if I could not be reached. I had signed in blue ink, because Dad had complained that black signatures were harder to distinguish from photocopies. The signature on Chelsea's commercial release matched that medical form exactly. Not merely in shape, but pixel for pixel. A tiny blue dot, where my pen had touched the paper before the first letter appeared in both images. The compression around the signature was different from the rest of the PDF, and the source file contained an image layer named Jess, Signature, Medical, PNG. The commercial release claimed I had signed it months earlier. The file history showed it had been created weeks after that date. Someone had placed the scanned signature onto the release, flattened the file, printed it, and scanned it again to make the page look less obviously assembled. There was no DocuSign record because no electronic signature service had been used. Chelsea had uploaded the PDF directly to the sponsor portal and checked a box warranting that her company possessed valid parental consent. The upload log carried her account credentials and the internet address of her studio. Dad's name appeared in the version history just before submission. He had opened the file, changed its title from Page, Release, Draft to Minor, Appearance, Release, Final, and moved it into a folder marked Legal Approved. Marian did not let me call that proof of who had physically pasted the signature. "It proves the document was assembled from your medical authorization, uploaded by Chelsea and reviewed by Charles," she said. "We preserve the source files, authenticate the logs, and let each of them explain their part." I wanted to feel victorious. Instead, I imagined Mom unfolding the medical form I had trusted her to keep for an emergency. I imagined my signature being lifted from the one document meant to protect Paige and placed onto another that sold access to her. Paige did not want the technical details. When I told her we had evidence that I never approved the campaign, she said, "Yellow light." And I stopped. Honoring those 2 words mattered more than explaining why I believed we were beginning to win. The financial records arrived next. Dad had described himself as a retired accountant who occasionally helped Chelsea organize receipts. The company books showed something different. He had created a limited liability company that received sponsor money before transferring it into Chelsea's operating account. He had also assigned internal codes to every campaign expense. The anniversary lodge invoice had been edited 3 times. The first label read Family Event. The second read Brand Retreat. The final version said, Paid from Paige Conversion Campaign. My father had once sent a restaurant bill back because the server charged him 75 cents too much for coffee. He made the manager print a corrected receipt and kept it in his wallet for a week as proof that details mattered. Now he wanted us to believe $62,000 had passed through accounts he controlled without attracting his attention. The records showed he had instructed Chelsea to describe Paige as a case study rather than a performer. A performer might require compensation, scheduled hours, and documentation. A case study could be presented as educational material supplied by a cooperating family. There was no trust for Paige, no payment ledger in her name, and no record of how many hours she had been photographed or filmed. The only time her name appeared clearly was when it helped the campaign team predict conversion. Marion sent Dad's attorney a written demand for an explanation. We did not call him, and I did not give him another chance to turn the conversation into a lecture about family loyalty. His response arrived the following afternoon. He denied creating the release and said he had relied on Chelsea's assurance that permission existed. In the next paragraph, he offered to fund Paige's education, pay my remaining mortgage, and reimburse my legal expenses if I agreed to resolve my claims privately before further records became public. The amount was larger than his first offer. It was also an admission without the honesty of one. Innocent people did not increase the price of silence each time a document appeared. Mom reacted before I did. She sent a furious email to Dad, Chelsea, and all 3 attorneys, accusing him of telling her the campaign had been reviewed and approved. Chelsea answered that Mom had supplied the photographs and private information without being asked to obtain any of it. Dad replied that neither of them understood the legal risks he had tried to manage. Within 12 minutes, they had stopped defending the family and begun building separate exits. Mom claimed she had been misled. Chelsea claimed she had trusted her parents. Dad claimed he had only cleaned up paperwork created by 2 careless women. Each version required the others to carry the blame. Among the cloud records was a planning document for the anniversary event. It contained 2 columns under my name. The first was labeled, Aggressive Maternal Response. If I shouted, touched Chelsea, grabbed the cupcake, or confronted the guests, the footage would be used to show that Paige lived with an unstable, defensive mother who rejected accountability. The second column was labeled, Passive Maternal Failure. If I stayed quiet or left, the edit would portray me as emotionally detached, unwilling to correct Paige, and unable to tolerate concern from relatives. The dessert table had never been a test with a right answer. It was a machine designed to turn any reaction into evidence against me. I had believed my silence allowed us to escape their plan. In reality, Chelsea had written silence into the plan before we arrived. A note beside the camera instructions said the child's hesitation should remain visible for at least 4 seconds. Another instructed Chelsea to pause after the insult, so the mother had time to react. Dad had added a comment asking whether both outcomes could be included in sponsor projections. At the bottom of the file was a transcript from a campaign meeting. Chelsea had answered him without hesitation. If she screams, we win. If she stays quiet, we still win. 3 days after we found the 2-column plan for my reaction, Marion received a confidential settlement proposal signed by attorneys representing Chelsea, Mom, and Dad. They had finally agreed on one thing. They wanted the case to disappear before the court examined the campaign records in public. The proposal offered to place $400,000 into an independent trust for Paige. Dad would also guarantee her college tuition, pay my current legal expenses, and cover therapy for as long as a licensed provider considered it necessary. Chelsea would remove the public posts in which Paige could be recognized and destroy the unreleased anniversary episode. On the first reading, it sounded like everything I had asked the legal system to protect. The conditions began on the next page. None of them would admit wrongdoing. I would sign a permanent confidentiality agreement, withdraw the request for a court order, and agree never to identify mom or dad as sources of the photographs, private statements, or campaign financing. Chelsea could no longer use Paige's name, face, or voice, but she would retain the right to use generalized educational insights taken from the campaign in future courses. Marian circled that language. They want to remove Paige from the packaging and keep the product, she said. I wanted to reject the offer immediately. I wanted my answer to be clean and brave enough that I never had to admit temptation. Instead, I read the financial terms again. My legal bills were growing, even with Marian handling the emergency phase through the nonprofit program. Expert analysis, court filings, secure document review, and future depositions would not remain free. A contingency agreement could cover claims for damages, but it could not reimburse every hour I missed from work or remove the stress from Paige's school days. The settlement could pay for college. It could give Paige access to therapy without my calculating what insurance would cover. It could help us move if the attention around her school became unbearable. It could prevent years of litigation and keep the worst details from spreading beyond the people who had already seen them. Money was not meaningless simply because it came from guilty people. For a single mother, pretending otherwise would have been another kind of dishonesty. What happens if I refuse? I asked. We request a preliminary injunction and continue discovery, Marian said. We may win. We may also spend months fighting over every file. More information could become part of the court record, although I will ask for protections involving Paige. And if I accept? Some material disappears. Some remains in Chelsea's possession under different language. Your parents avoid public accountability. You and Paige receive financial security. She closed the folder and looked at me. I will not tell you that choosing certainty is cowardice. I will not tell you that choosing litigation is courage. The decision belongs to you and Paige. I brought the proposal home but did not place the document in front of my daughter. I explained it while we sat at the kitchen table, using the choices she had already made about what she wanted to know. They are offering money for your future, I said. They would remove the pictures where people can recognize you. We would agree not to talk publicly about what Grandma, Grandpa, or Chelsea did. Paige considered that quietly. Would Chelsea still get to use my story? Not your name or your face. She wants to keep some of the lessons and examples if she changes them enough that people cannot identify you. So she gets to pretend they happened to someone else? In a general way, yes. Paige pulled the sleeves of her sweatshirt over her hands. She no longer did it constantly, but I noticed whenever she felt exposed. Then they're still paying me with money they made from taking my voice. The sentence was simple because the truth was simple. The offer did not return ownership to Paige. It paid her while allowing Chelsea to keep a cleaned, unnamed version of what she had stolen. The next morning, I authorized Marian to reject the settlement. We did not release the proposal or announce that I had refused money. Publicly explaining the choice would have turned Paige into a symbol again, this time for my moral position. She had already been used to sell wellness. I would not use her to sell my righteousness. Chelsea responded within hours. She posted a new clip titled, "What Really Happened at the Anniversary Party." It showed Paige approaching the dessert table, then cut directly to me, taking her cardigan from the chair. The audio between those moments had been replaced by soft music. A caption claimed that Paige had become overwhelmed by long-standing conflict between adults, and that Chelsea had tried to calm the situation. The clip then showed me walking toward the exit. Chelsea's voice played over the image. We may need another approach. She presented the line as concern for repairing the family. The video ended before anyone could hear what she meant by another approach or what had happened after Paige and I left. The post spread quickly. Some viewers called it proof that the cupcake comment had been exaggerated. Others demanded the unedited footage. Chelsea replied that she could not release more because she was protecting a child's privacy. Tyler Reed, the cameraman from the lodge, contacted Marian that evening. He had seen Chelsea's clip and recognized that shots from different points in the evening had been joined together. The audio had also been moved. He said the words, "another approach," were recorded after a separate conversation, not while I was leaving. Marian asked whether he possessed the original footage. Tyler said, "The production system automatically created 2 backups. One remained on a secured company server, and another had been archived with the project files. He had not deleted either because the preservation notice arrived before Chelsea's team could request changes." He offered to send Marian a copy through a file-sharing link. She refused. "We will collect the original through an agreed protocol," she said. "Do not forward, trim, rename, or export it. We need the native file and its metadata." Tyler sounded relieved to have instructions. He admitted that he had accepted Chelsea's explanation that the family had consented to filming. During the party, however, several things had made him uncomfortable. After Paige and I left the room, the cameras continued recording. Chelsea asked whether the crew had captured Paige pulling her hand away. Tyler would not repeat the entire exchange by phone, but he said one sentence afterward made him begin saving his own production notes. He also remembered Chelsea sending a server outside with a tray of cupcakes. "The server was told to offer one to Paige near my car, because the departure footage needed a softer ending. By the time the server reached the parking area, I had already driven away. The detail was not dangerous or dramatic. No one had tried to stop our car. What disturbed me was how quickly Chelsea had attempted to stage another moment after the first one failed to produce the results she wanted. Even our exit had been treated as unfinished content." Tyler agreed to provide a sworn statement and preserve everything until the files could be collected properly. Marian immediately added his records to the request for the preliminary injunction. She also asked the production company to confirm server access, backup dates, and whether anyone had attempted to overwrite the project after receiving notice. The court scheduled the hearing for the following week. 2 days before it, Tyler called Marian again. The production company had located not only the native anniversary footage, but the complete recording of a planning meeting. The short transcript we had seen in the cloud was accurate, but it was not complete. Tyler had listened only far enough to confirm that the file matched the production notes. He would not send it to us casually, and Marian did not ask him to. The recording was transferred through counsel, under a documented chain of custody. Before ending the call, Tyler repeated one line he had heard near the beginning. My father's voice was clear. "How much is the mother's reaction worth?" The hearing was not a criminal trial, and Marian reminded me of that before we entered the courtroom. The judge would decide whether Chelsea and her company could continue using Paige's image, voice, name, or story while the larger case moved forward. The court would also decide whether the defendants had to preserve and produce more records. No one was going to prison that day, and no final damages would be awarded. Paige stayed home with a family friend. Ryan did not attend. His affidavit was already in the record, confirming that he had never consented to the campaign, and that the divorce judgment gave me primary authority over contracts involving Paige's identity. I sat beside Marian and tried not to look toward my family. Chelsea arrived in a navy dress with flat shoes and no visible jewelry. Her makeup was lighter than usual, and her hair was pulled into a simple ponytail. She looked less like a wellness celebrity than a tired aunt who had been dragged into a misunderstanding. Mom wore gray and held a folded tissue in both hands. Dad carried a legal pad. None of them looked at one another. Chelsea's attorney began by describing Raising Without Excess as an educational project created in a controlled environment. He said the disputed materials were designed by a marketing team and had never been intended to harm Paige. When Chelsea testified, she said she did not personally write the harsh captions in the sponsor deck. "My team developed working language," she said. "I trusted their judgment." Marian displayed the edit history from the campaign platform. Each caption had been approved through Chelsea's personal administrator account. Several had comments beneath them. Make the mother more defensive. Keep the child's hesitation. Stronger emotional contrast here. Chelsea said assistants sometimes used her login. Marian showed the security log. Chelsea's account required a code sent to her phone for every approval, and the timestamps matched messages she had sent from that same phone moments later. Were your assistants also carrying your phone? Marian asked. Chelsea's attorney objected. The judge allowed Marian to move on, but the question had already done its work. Chelsea changed direction. She said the private details about Paige had come from Mom, and she had assumed a grandmother would never provide information she was not permitted to share. Mom's head snapped toward her. When Mom testified, she admitted sending photographs and repeating some of Paige's private statements. She insisted she believed I had consented because Dad told her the legal paperwork was complete. Dad did not react until Marian called him. He walked to the witness chair with the careful patience of a man entering a bank meeting. He said he helped Chelsea organize expenses, but did not participate in creative decisions. He had reviewed files only to keep the company records orderly. I was the accountant, he said. Nothing more. Marian placed the lodge invoice on the screen. Dad had edited it 3 times. The final internal note read, "Paid from Paige conversion campaign." He said the wording was an accounting shorthand created by someone else, so Marian opened the version history. His username appeared beside the change. Dad said he did not remember making it. The judge asked whether he remembered correcting a 75-cent error on a restaurant bill the month before. That receipt had appeared in his own production because he used it to support a business expense claim. Dad's mouth tightened. Marian did not smile. So details matter when they cost you 75 cents, but not when $62,000 funds an event built around your granddaughter? His attorney objected, and the judge told Marian to rephrase. She did not need to. Everyone had heard it. Chelsea returned to the phrase controlled environment when Marian questioned her about the dessert table. We needed consistent lighting and audio for authentic storytelling, Chelsea said. Marian studied her for a moment. Most people call that staging. A few people in the gallery shifted. The judge warned everyone to remain quiet, but even she looked down before asking Marian to continue. Tyler's native footage was admitted with its metadata and production logs. The courtroom lights dimmed, and the video began before Paige approached the dessert table. Mom stood near the camera and gave a small downward motion with 2 fingers. Tyler adjusted the frame. Chelsea looked toward him, touched the microphone at her collar, and waited until the red tally light appeared. Paige stepped toward the cupcake with the sugar bee. Chelsea delivered the line exactly as I remembered it. Don't eat too much. You didn't pay for any of this. The laughter sounded worse through the courtroom speakers. Without music, polished captions, or Chelsea's narration, there was nowhere for the cruelty to hide. Paige's hand stopped above the cupcake before she pulled it back against her chest. On the screen, I lifted her cardigan and led her away. Mom tried to block us. Dad filmed with his phone. Chelsea did not follow to comfort Paige. She turned toward Tyler instead. Did we get the hand pulling back? Tyler answered. Yes, but the mother didn't react. Chelsea looked toward the door where we had disappeared. Then we'll need another trigger. When the lights came up, Chelsea said the word trigger referred to the filming schedule. She claimed the crew needed another transition shot because I had ended the scene early. Marian responded by playing the production meeting recorded 2 weeks before the party. Dad's voice came first. How much is the mother's reaction worth? A campaign analyst discussed expected subscriber conversions. Then Chelsea explained the 2 possible edits. If she screams, we win. If she stays quiet, we still win. Mom's voice followed. Paige trusts me. I can get more from her if we need it. The recording continued long enough for Dad to ask whether Paige's real name could be removed from public invoices while remaining in internal projections. Chelsea's attorney asked to pause the audio. Mom's attorney accused Chelsea of misleading her. Dad's attorney argued that the statements were brainstorming, not final decisions. For the first time, the three of them stopped pretending to be a family defending a shared misunderstanding. Chelsea said Mom had pushed the body image angle because it attracted engagement. Mom said Chelsea had promised the material would remain private. Dad said both women had ignored his warnings about documenting consent. Marian did not interrupt. She let them dismantle one another. The judge called a recess. I remained at the table while my family disappeared into separate conference rooms with separate lawyers. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired and slightly sick. The people in those recordings had not sounded angry or confused. They had sounded organized. When court resumed, the judge granted the preliminary injunction. Chelsea, her company, and anyone acting for them were prohibited from using Paige's name, face, voice, private statements, or recognizable story while the case continued. They were ordered to preserve all campaign data, provide an initial accounting, and identify every person or company that had received material involving Paige. The judge also found enough concern about the consent form to require deeper forensic review and referral to the appropriate authorities. She made clear that she was not deciding criminal guilt, only preserving the issue for further investigation. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited behind a barrier. Marian guided me toward the elevators without stopping, but Chelsea broke away from her attorney. Jessica. I kept walking. Look at me, she called. You know I never meant for this to happen. I did not turn around. Intention had become her favorite hiding place. Inside the elevator, I called the family friend staying with Paige. She put my daughter on the phone. How did it go? Paige asked. The judge stopped them from using your story while the case continues. There was a pause, followed by a quiet exhale. What do you want for dinner? I asked. Anything without a camera. I smiled for the first time that day. Before the elevator reached the lobby, Marian received a new email. Chelsea's agency had completed its internal review. Effective immediately. It was terminating representation and notifying the sponsors that it would no longer distribute or promote her work. 10 months after the hearing, the last accounting report arrived on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Nothing had collapsed overnight. Chelsea did not leave the courthouse in handcuffs, and my parents did not wake the next morning without money or friends. Their consequences came slowly, through canceled contracts, forensic reports, sworn testimony, legal bills, and documents they could no longer explain away. Chelsea's agency had terminated her before we left the courthouse. Within 2 weeks, every remaining sponsor suspended or ended its agreement with her. Several demanded repayment after learning that she had guaranteed valid parental consent without possessing it. Her paid community remained online for another month, but membership dropped each time another company confirmed it would no longer work with her. The final accounting showed exactly how much money had been earned from content involving Paige. The court ordered those profits returned, along with the portion of sponsorship revenue tied to the anniversary campaign. Chelsea permanently lost the right to use Paige's name, image, voice, private statements, artwork, or any recognizable version of her story. The criminal investigation focused on the consent PDF, not the words Chelsea had spoken beside the cupcake. Being cruel was not the same as committing forgery. Creating and submitting a commercial document with a copied signature, then using it to secure sponsorship money, was different. Chelsea eventually accepted a negotiated plea connected to the falsified consent and the false assurances she had made when submitting it. She received probation, community service, restitution, and restrictions on producing commercial content involving minors without independently verified permission. She did not receive the dramatic prison sentence some people online demanded. I did not need her locked behind bars to know she had lost the one thing she valued most. She could no longer control the story. Mom's consequences were quieter and, in some ways, more complete. The account records identified every fake profile she had operated. Our relatives saw the comments she had written about Paige and me, including the ones she had pretended came from concerned teachers and mothers. Aunt Carol called me after reading them. "She wrote all of that?" she asked. "Yes." Carol was silent for a long moment before saying, "She told me strangers were attacking the family. She was the strangers." Mom continued to defend herself. She said the comments had been written to create discussion, not to hurt Paige. She said she had been manipulated by Chelsea's business language and misled by Dad's assurances. Every explanation required someone else to carry the blame. No one believed her anymore. She was not permitted to contact Paige directly. Any future relationship would require Paige's agreement, a therapist's assessment, and proof that Mom could respect boundaries without using guilt. Paige did not ask to see her, and I did not encourage her to reconsider. Dad's records caused his downfall with less drama than his testimony had. The same careful accounting system he believed would protect him showed where every dollar had entered, how it had been relabeled, and which party expenses had been paid from the campaign. He was ordered to return the anniversary costs and his share of the money that had passed through the company he created. To meet the obligation, he sold the fishing boat he had spent years polishing more often than he used it. When I heard, I expected satisfaction. Instead, I pictured him standing beside that boat, telling me as a child that numbers never lied if people recorded them correctly. He had been right. The recovered money did not go into my personal account. An independent trust was established for Paige, managed by a professional trustee who had no connection to our family. It would cover therapy, education, and expenses directly related to repairing the harm done to her. The attorney preparing the trust asked whether we wanted Paige's name in the title. She shook her head. "They've made enough money from my name already." The trust received a neutral name instead. We did not move into a larger house, buy a new car, or turn the settlement into proof that suffering had rewarded us. Our kitchen cabinet still had the crooked handle visible in Chelsea's sponsor deck. I finally replaced it one Saturday because it annoyed me, not because I wanted to erase every place where a photograph had been taken. Paige continued therapy. Some weeks she talked about the campaign. Other weeks she discussed school, friendships, and the fear that people were secretly watching her. Gradually, the gray sweatshirt stopped being armor. She still wore it when she liked it, but she no longer reached for it every time someone lifted a phone. We changed the way we spoke to each other. I asked before sharing a school photograph with Ryan. I stopped telling relatives stories about Paige simply because they seemed harmless. When she became quiet, I did not demand an explanation to prove we had an honest relationship. Food also became ordinary again. I did not use dessert as a reward for a good report card or remove it because of a difficult day. I stopped asking whether she was hungry, when what I really meant was whether she was upset. Some changes felt natural. Others required me to notice habits I had inherited from Mom and mistaken for care. Losing my family still hurt. There were mornings when I remembered Dad checking the oil in my first car, or Mom sitting beside me during Paige's birth. Good memories did not disappear because the people inside them later caused harm. I could miss who I believed they were without reopening the door to who they had proven themselves to be. That distinction took longer to learn than anything Marion taught me about evidence. Near the end of the school year, a letter arrived from Mom. Her handwriting covered the front of the envelope. She had written my name first, then added Paige's beneath it. I did not open it. That evening, I placed it on the kitchen table and told Paige what it was. "Do you want to know what she wrote?" I asked. Paige looked at the envelope without touching it. "Do you?" "I'm not sure." She considered that answer, then pushed the letter toward the center of the table. "Not yet." I placed it in a drawer. It remained sealed. Maybe we would open it one day, and maybe we never would. The important thing was that Mom no longer controlled when her words entered our home. 2 weeks later, Paige and I stopped at a small bakery after her final therapy appointment of the school year. There was no sponsored event, no family celebration, and no camera crew pretending to preserve memories. A glass case displayed cookies, fruit tarts, and cupcakes decorated with small sugar flowers. Near the corner sat one with a yellow bee leaning against a tower of white frosting. Paige pointed at it. Still looks like a building code violation. We can report it to the authorities after we eat, I said. She smiled, then became serious. Do I have to earn it? I knew she was not only asking about the cupcake. No, sweetheart. Food isn't something you earn. Love shouldn't be either. The woman behind the counter waited while Paige made her choice. I did not answer for her or suggest something smaller. Paige asked for the cupcake with the bee and carried it to a table near the window. She peeled back the paper and took one bite when she was ready. Then she set it down and began telling me about a drawing she wanted to finish at home. She did not eat to prove she was healed, and she did not leave it untouched to prove she had control. It was simply hers to choose. I looked around the bakery. A man read near the door. 2 women talked over coffee. Rain traced quiet lines down the window. No one cared what was on Paige's plate or how quickly she reached for it. That ordinary moment was what my family had stolen long before the anniversary party. They had taken the simple act of a child choosing something she liked and turned it into evidence, content, and profit. Now we were taking it back. No one was filming, no one was counting, and for the first time in a long time, my daughter did not pull her hand back.